Horvath, and he'll be talking about This is Bliss, which you regulars will recognize as being a favorite theme of mine. And Michael Foley, who has a new project he's going to talk about, launch photo books, which is going to be opening up in the gallery. So it should be a good day, even though it's not many people. The usual things before we get going. Obviously, we are recording today, so just sit back and enjoy if you don't want to be recorded. Everybody's turned off their mics. Good, I don't have to tell you about that. Hold your questions till the speakers are finished. You know, John will take questions when he's done, and then Michael. And I guess that's it. John, I'm going to pass it off to you and let you get going.
Okay, thanks. Hey everyone, thank you Michael, and good to see everybody here and for joining on a holiday weekend, so appreciate that. I'm coming to you from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and as Michael mentioned, I'll share with you a project called This is Bliss that I've been working on, or I should say that I worked on from 2014 up until this past summer, and this talk coincides with a moment where the book for the project is just about to be released. So it actually does exist. I have one copy in my possession that I've received from the publishers, but it's co-published. So there's a stateside publisher, Yaffe Press, and then a publisher based in Amsterdam, FW Books. So they teamed up to publish the book. So it's popping up internationally. I'm seeing the book arrive in European bookstores, but should be to the States end of May-ish. My plan is to talk a little bit about that project, and then also happy to entertain any questions about the book or the book process. It's called BookTalk, so I assume we'll talk about the book. And I'm great if this does end up being conversational, if anybody wants to ask questions while I'm going. The project's pretty expansive, so I've attempted to condense it considerably. So is it okay if I go about 25 minutes or so, half hour? Is that great? Okay. I will share my screen now. Okay. Should be seeing that. Okay, slides are up. Okay, great. So the preface or the preamble, I guess. Oh, I guess I have times on this. Apologies. Let me change that real quick. Apologize for that. Let's see if I can just. Okay, are you seeing slides or are you seeing the whole spread?
Whole spread. I see the whole spread.
Okay. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I didn't know that this was timed. Okay, so the start of this is that in the summer of 2013, I was going through kind of a starting over moment in my life. I was also on a road trip out west, my first time driving through the Northwest, first time driving through Idaho. And coinciding with that starting over moment, was on the road, a very hot summer day in the middle of the Idaho desert, and I saw a sign that just said "Bliss that way." And I thought, well, I'm gonna go and check out and see what that looks like.
Okay,
So I
John,
showed,
before you get going,
yeah,
we're seeing a side by side.
you're
We've
seeing
got two
it.
slides up at once.
Juice. Oh, I'm only seeing one.
Yeah, we're seeing your presentation mode. So we're seeing the slide you're showing and then what's to
Weird.
come, and then a
Okay.
bottom strip of images. Yeah.
Let's try this again. I'm so sorry.
That's not a problem. There you go.
Okay. Okay, so I saw a sign that just said Bliss this direction, and that was enough of a prompt for me to exit the freeway and just see what happiness might look like in the middle of the desert. So I exited, and fortunately there was a gentleman that was watering a patch of corn on the side of the road. And I pulled over and just introduced myself and said, is it kind of okay if I walk the town, take some pictures? And before I knew it, we got into a couple hour long conversation about the history of the town. And the reason I have this slide up right now, Winsburg, Ohio, is the way in which the project progressed is that it came to incorporate a number of different forms. So there's photographic works, and then there's video and some paintings and some objects and a variety of different things. And the book on screen, I come from an undergraduate studies where I was an English major and a philosophy major. And I was introduced to a short story format called a short story cycle. And the way in which the short story cycle operates is that it's an assembly of a number of standalone kind of vignettes, and then each one can be assembled together to kind of contribute to a bigger narrative when everything is all said and done. So that's how This Is Bliss works, is that it's a kind of a visual translation of that, where there's all of these different contributing artworks and pieces, but when put together, they kind of paint a more comprehensive picture of my time spent in town. So as I mentioned, I pulled off onto the side of the road, and I spoke with this individual. His name was Buck Hall, and I didn't know quite what to expect. I introduced myself, and he was wearing a necklace with the teeth of all of his recent hunting kills on it. And that was very far away from my firsthand experience. I'm not a hunter. As I mentioned, I come from the Midwest, which is a hunting area, but I was raised in the suburbs and never hunted or fired a gun or anything like that in my life. So we got to talking, and he started to tell me that Bliss was a town of 300 people currently. But at one point, it was a town well into the thousands. The way he described it was 300 people, 299 people when he dies. So kind of the local narrative was that it was a town that was kind of in economic decline and slowly shrinking in its geographical footprint, for one, but also just its kind of cultural and economic footprint too. And this is a picture that shows kind of the pre-construction of the interstate. The Interstate 84 is what directed traffic away from town. But prior to that, Bliss sat at a crossroads. So anybody that was traveling through that region had to intersect with the town, which is what kind of gave it its economic vibrancy at one point. Once the interstate was constructed, then traffic was redirected away from town. So it's stuck a little bit in a different moment, a different era, kind of a time capsule as it is right now. Buck also shared with me that the town emerged originally as a rail town. It's one of the first kind of points of intersection for the rail system in Idaho. So this picture is made from the vantage point of kind of the quote unquote beginning and end of the major narrative around the town. The rail as it intersects, and then from underneath the interstate overpass. So if you pass through Bliss now, it's about a 1 mile stretch of road and filled with a number of different relics from the past. All that kind of remains is there's a couple of gas stations, a school, a small church, a laundromat, and a couple of diners. So that patch of corn is what I got first introduced to with Buck. And then as I left for the day, and I was actually heading back, I teach in Milwaukee, so I was heading back to Milwaukee, and as I left, he gave me a tomato for the road. And that's the first gesture of many that I actually received from members of the community that were very, very generous over the next number of years. Once I returned to Milwaukee, I began researching the greater history of the area and learned that Bliss is very rich in its kind of contribution to many of the bigger narratives around American history. It sits on the Oregon Trail and not too far from the Lewis and Clark Trail. In terms of photographic history, it's on the Snake River. So a couple hundred miles away from the very famous image of Ansel Adams, the Tetons and the Snake, and just about 20-25 miles away from Timothy O'Sullivan's Shoshone Falls that was made here. Many of the themes that began to emerge in the project on the macro were these kind of grand pursuits of manifest destiny and idealism and these grand gestures surrounding kind of the West, and then how sometimes there's these kind of buried and not necessarily desirable histories underneath the surface. And then for me on the micro, it was a location that had this kind of double name of, or double meaning, right? It's a town called Bliss, but it's kind of in this descending state, and that kind of coincided with my personal experiences of being in a starting over moment. Also, the Snake, very close, you can actually see Shoshone Falls here. This is the site of Evel Knievel's attempt to jump the Snake River in the 1970s, and which obviously ultimately ended in not making it, crash landing on the rocks. So some of these histories slowly kind of worked their way into the production of the greater body of work. When I returned to Bliss, I gave myself the instruction of being open to pursuing a deeper understanding of happiness, because I felt at that time in my life, I didn't really have a claim to understanding it or saying I know what this is, because again, I was kind of in this in-between moment. So I sought out what I saw to be some of the kind of archetypical gatekeepers of happiness through a number of different perspectives or lenses. So I spent some time with the pastor of the church. I had my first alcoholic beverage of my life in the Bliss Saloon. I spent some time with the prom queen and king of the Bliss graduating class of 2014. They graduated 7 students in their senior class. And even in those 7, they had 1 international foreign exchange student, which was kind of amazing. So the individual on the right, Brandon, was both the prom king as well as the valedictorian that year. And then I was introduced beyond the kind of archetypical and into some of what I like to think of as more of a local legend. So when I spent time in that in the diner on my very first day, I said, "Who should I know in town?" And they said, "Do you know the Prince of Bliss?" I said, "I don't know the Prince of Bliss, but I feel like I should." And they said, "Well, the prince works down at the gas station, and you need to meet the prince because the prince is the son of the king, and the king is the king because he owns the gas station and sells all the fireworks on 4th of July and stuff like that." So I went and I introduced myself to the prince, and we became quick friends. He was working in the gas station as an attendant, but also remotely studying to get his PhD in Eastern Studies. And coming out of my own personal history as a philosophy major, we kind of hit it off right off the bat. And I include this piece right now because this became a moment where a collaborative element between myself and the residents began to emerge. So I made some portraits of the prince, and we decided maybe that's not necessarily the best format to represent his persona and our exchange in town. So I asked if he would write something that would serve as kind of an introduction to town, or what came to be almost a de facto artist statement for the body of work. And it was important to me that as I was in Bliss, I knew there's obviously very, very complicated histories around people that are not from a place going and making work in a place, and then claiming to kind of tell the story of that place. And I was attempting to come a little bit from a different direction and say, I'm going to tell my story as I have experiences in this place. And then also there's going to be different kind of platforms and ways for the residents that I come to encounter to tell their story to, or have their voice in. And that's where that short story cycle format comes in. Each one of these pieces kind of is its own thing, but if we put all of our voices together, then it tells a little bit more of a comprehensive whole for the narrative. So the prince very generously offered to write this welcome message. He did so on guest checks because he was working at the diner that day. And what he wrote was, "The quiet kingdom of bliss sleeps on a hill above the Snake River. It is dilapidated barns and fallow cornfields and white potato cellars stuffed with the future French fries of America. Cowboys ride their horses through the country as they guide their grazing cattle. The locals satiate their thirst at Jenny's or Frank's bars and fill their bellies at Ziggy's Gas and Grill. Life in bliss is simple but not simplistic. Our hamlet is content yet proud of our humble community, and gracious natives are eager to show it off to all who come and visit." The prince is still in Bliss, so if you find your way to Bliss, Idaho, reach out to the prince and say that you saw his diner checks, and I think he'll know what you're talking about. So the largest contributing element to the project are the photographs. I'm going to slow this down a little bit. The photographs that kind of serve more as documentary and this kind of outsider point of view in the town. So the pictures here range in scale, and this is really me walking the streets of town, coming to meet some of the it's going a little faster than I'd like. Coming to meet some of the locals, make their portraits, and then kind of live in a little bit more of a traditional kind of documentary photographic mode. So I'll let some of these play through. This is a tradition where people wrap up a dollar bill with a thumbtack and a stack of coins, and they throw it towards the ceiling. And if it sticks, that's supposed to be good fortune. And if it doesn't stick, then I guess try again. But I kind of loved these little gestures that we're trying to bring in kind of good luck. This is a dog named Fruit Snacks. I stayed in the Amber Inn, which was a motel. And I think probably stylistically, this will feel pretty familiar to, a tradition of kind of photographer on the road in the American West, and kind of participating in that lineage, and then coupling that work with a number of these other works that were kind of more of a response or a reaction to my time spent in town. So Buck Hall, as I mentioned, was that first individual that I met on the side of the road. And when I returned back to town, I asked Buck, what should I do when I get back to town? And he said, well, there's not much to do here, but I'll tell you what you're gonna do. You're gonna drive down the side of this road, and you're gonna look up to the cliffside. And when you look up there, you're gonna see the profile of the old Native American chief in the side of the mountain. So I did, and I found it, and he said, now here's what you're gonna do, is you're gonna come back when there's a full moon, and you're gonna take a picture of it, and you're gonna make a postcard, and you're gonna sell these postcards, and you're gonna make millions of dollars. So on my third trip back to town, I was very fortunate to have a supermoon in the sky, and it was in the right part of the sky. So I made this picture, and I presented it to Buck, and I said, is this what you have in mind? And he said, that's close enough. So I got him to autograph it, and then we produced the postcard, and now this became the official postcard of Bliss, Idaho. So if you go through the gas station there, very popular with truckers and people that are stopping to get a piece of pie in the diner. But now Bliss has a postcard that was conceived of by one of the residents, and then I just happened to have a hand in helping bring it to life. As I mentioned, I had my first ever alcoholic beverage of my life in the Bliss Saloon. This was another thing that I was kind of open to pursuing a new potential pathway towards happiness for myself. So this license plate here indicates the name of the bartender that was on site in the saloon the day that I had my first beer. She's just known locally as Cinderella. So Bliss has the prince and Bliss has Cinderella. And it's spelled this way because it has 7 letters and it fits on our license plate. So I went and I had my beer on a just before noon on a Sunday, late morning on a Sunday. I videotaped myself doing it, and I didn't really want too much interruption or interaction. So I set up a time that it would be pretty quiet in there. So I had that beer, and then when I left with a bottle, and I decided maybe with this artifact I'll present it in a gallery at some point, like on a pedestal, as representative of that moment. But then as time went on, it dawned on me to honor Cinderella a little bit differently. So I worked with a glass maker who was able to melt down my beer bottle and reform it into the shape of a glass slipper. So it's about a 4-inch, really bumpy, filled with flaws object. This is a 2nd generation piece, which is photograms in the darkroom of the glass slipper on one panel. And then the other panel shares a brief narrative of my time spent with Cinderella. The Bliss Saloon was small and covered with wood paneling. Apologies. It was lit by strands of colored Christmas lights and a large television mounted just behind the bar. I'd made an arrangement with the owner to arrive before the regulars did to have a beer, the first of my life. I was greeted by a woman in her mid-40s, dressed in blue jeans and a paisley top. She told me her name was Cinderella and spelled it for me. She was from Glens Ferry and putting her daughter through college. You've never really had a drink, she asked. Never. Why is that? I don't even have a good reason. She smiled and told me to take a seat. I grabbed a table and back, and she brought me the bottle of Miller Genuine Draft I had requested. This isn't very good, she said. That's okay, I'll give it a go. I gave her my $3, and she returned to the back of the bar to restock the cooler. Every now and then, she turned around and smiled, It took 10 minutes to finish the beer, and I asked Cinderella if I could take the bottle with me as a souvenir. She laughed, wiped down my table, and sent me on my way. And then the bottle, of course, came to its new form as the glass slipper. So those were two moments of direct kind of interaction and something approaching collaboration with residents. And then there's a few moments where I took the cue to kind of collaborate with history a little bit. So as I mentioned, this was the site where Evel Knievel attempted to jump the Snake River and famously crash landed on the rocks below. This again is about 25, 30 miles downriver from Bliss. And I saw that as this great moment of this sort of larger than life gesture, attempting to create this or achieve this kind of monumental achievement, but then just kind of like tumbling and falling on the rocks. So that was this kind of moment in pop culture, American history, in the macro that kind of again was echoing my state of mind in the micro. So this is my attempt. I kayaked down the Snake River to the site where Evel Knievel crash landed on the rocks. And then I attempted to jump it myself, but a little bit more safely by skipping stones. So this is a sequence. I actually got further than Evel Knievel did. So I also left with a bunch of Evel Knievel stones. So those have been presented as well as kind of artifacts of that moment. Another moment of kind of collaborating with some history, thinking about the Oregon Trail, photographic expeditions, ideas around specimen collecting and documenting, flora and objects and details along the landscape. So I kind of entered into that history through a historical process, but trying to contemporize it a little bit. So this is a series or another one of the standalone works that is titled Beer Bottles and Tumbleweeds as Collected on the Highway 30 Turnoff. So these are all 8x10 tin types. My modern day specimen collecting is the act of collecting beer bottles that have just been thrown out of people's cars as they're driving through town. So they're driving and drinking with open bottles, finish one up, chuck it out, and then I'm picking them up on the side of the road, packaging them in bubble wrap and shipping them to myself via UPS so I can make tin types back here in Milwaukee in my studio. So as you can see, that was a large grid that takes on variable exhibition forms, but all 8x10 tin types. Just maybe another piece or two that I'll share, and there's a few more that aren't included in this presentation that are available in the book. But this piece called Somewhere Out West, I was speaking with this woman, Elena, who's the custodian in the Bliss School. And again, I just kind of asked, is there anything I should know about this town or anything I should go check out? And she said, one thing that you might be interested in is that this gentleman wrote a letter to one of the former residents in the town, and the resident's name was Holden Bowler. And Holden Bowler was the father of Elena's, Elena was in a relationship that worked for a man who was the son of Holden Bowler. And it turned out that Holden Bowler was the person who inspired J.D. Salinger to write The Catcher in the Rye. She had told me that, and I thought, there's no way. And then I started to do a little digging, and it's the strongest theory, or the most accepted theory, is that Holden Bowler, who's isolated here in red, met J.D. Salinger when they were both in the Navy. They had youthful experiences together, and the letter that Elena was referencing was from Jerry Salinger, and it said, or it referenced something like, whatever you like about this character is based on you, and whatever you don't, I completely made up. So I spoke with Elena, and I was able to get introduced to the house that Holden Bowler built in Bliss. And there was a caretaker on the property who allowed me in to make photographs. And here was a copy of Catcher in the Rye on the shelf of one of the bookshelves. So this is Holden Caulfield's personal copy of Catcher in the Rye. So I have that image. And then this was a very important book for me as a young individual, somebody who went to study English literature eventually. And then I also thought it was fascinating that, quote unquote, Holden Caulfield, one of the classic kind of distraught individuals of American literature in the 20th century, was from a town called Bliss. So I wanted to go back into the text and see if there was something that I could connect with. And I'm going to go back a slide. And there was one line where I saw Holden's narrative intersecting with my own narrative, intersecting with Bliss. And it says, in a few days, I'd be somewhere out west where it was very pretty and sunny and where nobody would know me. So I hand redacted an entire copy of Catcher in the Rye. And that became another piece that is included in the installation. And then just very briefly, here's a few installation pictures of how this body of work comes to live in space. It's it's variable, so it can take a lot of different shapes. But I like the idea that one can enter an exhibition or a gallery kind of at any point, and similar to how one might enter a town, and get a different experience and be introduced to different people along the way. And then this is a little bit more of a concentrated installation where the pictures go with the pictures. I referenced that there's paintings. I don't think I have any in this slideshow, but the paintings go with the paintings, tintypes with the tintypes, and so on and so forth. So that's the project. And I'll stop sharing real quick. And I'll just quickly say that I was very fortunate to present that work to Jennifer Yoffe many times over the course of a number of years. And we stayed in touch and decided to do the book together. And we were able to connect with FW Books and Hans Gremmen. Hans Gremmen is the designer of the book, which is here. And one thing that I love about Hans's approach is he somehow managed to get all of that stuff in a way that really made a lot of sense in between the covers of a book. And I don't know how effective this will be, but whoops, apologies. You can see there's a lot of pictures, and then there's Buck Hall's postcard, and there's a number of these contributing elements that are kind of spread throughout. I've written a short story that is a fictional composite of my time spent in town. So that's included here. So all told, there's about 15 or 18-ish kind of contributing works that all assemble together to complete the Bliss work.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody have anything for John?
I think it's a delightful journey, narrative story project. And there's so many, what I love about it is your adaptability to the different circumstances that came your way. And then, a lot of photographers will go out and they'll be very single-minded. No matter what they come across, they still photograph it or approach it the same way that they know. But what I really enjoyed about what you did with each little twist and turn and new person you met, you kind of created your own little kind of visual vignette for them or for what you encountered, which I really admire. So there are like a lot of different pathways, I'm sure, that are in the book, and to fully comprehend it to really get in touch with your journey and the relationship, the history of the way that photographers photograph the West and experience the West. And like you're saying at the front, I mean, there's a lot of kind of traditional, I should say, approaches that you took, with a subject matter like this, but you also, and most importantly, found a way to make it your own. And that, at the end of the day, is the most exciting thing. I just had two quickie questions that were like slightly related, not quite, but the interest, the poem or the I won't say it was a poem, but that Prince wrote on those guest checks.
Yeah.
I loved it, and I don't know if that was a spontaneous thing or it was something he had already had, and he went out because it seemed so deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
But what I also liked about it with the subtlety is that there was a missing check in that sequence, and I was like, "Ooh, I wonder what was on that check." Like maybe it was just a random, or maybe wrote something and like crumpled it up and went on to the next number. But I thought that was like a nice little thing to discover. And then I wanted to ask you, was when you went to the spot to do Evel Knievel, was there any kind of commemorative plaque or anything that's saying, hey, on this spot, 40 years ago today this is where this happened, or is it non-existent?
Yeah, to the Evel Knievel. So on the, I guess, up on the top of the canyon where all of the civilization is, there's a plaque there, and I think there's even, I wasn't able to access it when I was there, but I think there might even be some roads now that are on like privately owned land that will lead, like you can actually still see the ramp is still in place.
Wow. Okay.
But there is a little monument up top. Down below there's not.
Okay.
So that was, me renting a kayak, and then based on how I was understanding where the ramp was up above and kind of.
Yeah. You got your bearings.
Yeah, finding that down below. So nothing down there. But to the comment on the Prince's checks, I don't know the answer to it. I always assume there's like on that missing check, it's like an order for a burger and fries or something like that. Like someone
he got interrupted.
Right.
No, that's great. I don't want to know where that missing check is, but I just think it's a kind of a nice little thing because everything's so deliberate.
Yeah.
And the last question I have for you, because this project is so sprawling, and I mean that actually in a complimentary way, what kept you going through it all?
I love that question. So I'll answer it the very quick answer I'll say is the residents. So I went there originally, so I made 5 separate trips to town, and this didn't end up really manifesting in the body of work, but just on the process side, I think it's interesting is I went for 10 days for each trip, or at least the first 3 trips, because I read somewhere online that 10 was numerologically a number of happiness. So I was like, well, I got to go for 10 days because I'm going to happy Idaho. But the fact that I was there for those stretches of time, I at first thought I'm going for 1 trip for 10 days. And then by the 9th day, it's like, I have so much stuff I still have to do here based on the residents' interest and kind of excitement. One thing I learned that's probably not a surprise is most people that kind of travel through there it's a hop on, hop off town. You get off, you fill up your gas, and then maybe you get something in the diner and then you leave. So most of the residents were really fascinated that like there was somebody hanging around and taking an interest in this area. So they just kept feeding me more information, and then like little ideas would emerge, and it's like, I think I got to do something with that. So that's what kind of kept me going kept me coming back, was every time I went there, they kind of filled my card with more stuff than I could do. And then I knew I had to come back again. And then, I got to a point where I felt like I was getting enough of that sort of variation or those different voices into the mix to really achieve what I was hoping to. in terms of balance. Like I didn't want it to be like, here's 50 pictures and then a postcard. I was really hoping that each one of these things could kind of carry its own weight. So it ended up going, I had a list of things I wanted to take on. Actually, one of the great things about working with Hans Gremmen in the book is there were a few things that I hadn't completed. And I thought, well, every project has a few things that you don't get to complete. But his design opened up these opportunities for me to actually go back into the studio and make even new work after I saw his first kind of attempt at laying out the book. So in the end, I kind of was able to take on everything, and then the book becomes this really great sort of representative end of that project. And I'm not in a starting over point anymore in my life. So like I couldn't make this work, I don't think, out of the same spirit again. So it kind of felt like, yeah, this is the right time for it to end. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, Howard Medford here. I have a question. John, did the town, did they come to celebrate you at any point? I mean, this is quite a tribute to the town. Did they adopt you or put a sign out at the city limits for you or anything?
To be determined on the sign, but I actually am going to be going back through there this summer once I have some copies of the book in hand to kind of hand them off to people that I'm still in contact with. I think the biggest celebration I got, there's two celebrations I got. One was when I sat down at the diner, probably on my third trip, and the waitress said, "Where have you been? And where do you want to go?" So that kind of felt like I was part of the town. And then the other one was in one of the gas stations. I ran into the mayor of town, and he said, "Oh, you're back. Every single time you're here, or every single time you share something online, all of our Facebook groups light up." So they probably even know about this talk today, because they're always kind of sharing and following along. But nothing in terms of like this is Bliss Day or anything like that. Not yet.
A nice project. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, John, did you ever get your second beer?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've expanded on that tradition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if nobody else has anything, we'll thank John and move on to Michael.
Thank you.
All right. John, thanks. That was awesome. So my name is Michael Foley. Thank you so much for having me here today. I actually have a very brief presentation of something that in some ways has been in the works for many, many years, but has just come together over the last 3 weeks. So let me just share my screen. I just have a few things to bring to you here. All right, can you all see that?
Mhm.
Okay, so as a lot of you probably know, I have a gallery. We actually have a painting show up right now, but I started in this business in photography as an artist myself, using photography, and then went on to work with several photography galleries, and then opened my own space in 2004. It's a commercial gallery, and that's what I do. I'm not a nonprofit. I actually put work on the walls and try to sell it. That's my game at the gallery. At the same time, in 2002, I started to teach quite a bit. I taught the School of Visual Arts here in New York, International Center of Photography, and I've done workshops here and there, and taught at the New School here in Parsons. So I'm very engaged with the practice of teaching photography, but more at a professional level in that, not so much how to light, how to use digital camera, how to use Photoshop. That's not my specialty, but really how to be a professional artist. And what I discovered having the gallery over the last 17 years now was one of the, when I first started, the number one thing that photographers wanted was an exhibition. That was what they wanted. And number two was they wanted to be represented by a gallery. Those were really essential, important goals that I found most photographers wanting. Then as time moved on, things have changed, and the access to photographers and their work, the ability to sell it and to show it has really become multifaceted. So the one thing that I still find that photographers want is a book, is a publication of the work, something that, maybe in John's case, kind of brings all these years together of, time and work and into some form called the book. And what I found was here, at least in New York, there weren't a lot of platforms, physical spaces that could support the launch of a book. And so photographers would publish, either be published or self-publish or do kind of collaborative publishing, and they would have the book, and then what? Maybe put it on their website to sell, maybe be at some book fairs, especially if they didn't have gallery representation. There was no real kind of support system for them. And I found people coming to me over the last year or two, especially, saying, listen, I have this book. Would you mind if I do a book signing here, a book launch? And I thought that, that's great. And then it dawned on me, why not just kind of do this myself? And so I came up with this idea of launch photo books. And we just opened like a month ago. It's kind of been a soft, gradual opening with getting pieces of furniture and bookshelves in different ways, to actually kind of build out the bookshop. I do it in the back of the gallery here. So it's not a separate space, it's actually contained within the gallery. And I wanted to create an environment that was kind of a reflection of a gallery environment. So most bookshops we go into, they're stacks and they're tables with stacks of books. Some are in crappy condition, some are dog-eared, some are disheveled, some are mislabeled, some are in a category they shouldn't be. I wanted to keep things here very simple and displayed, because I know a lot of time is spent on the actual cover of the book, but in many instances, when you go to a bookshop, you don't really see the cover. You have to pull it out by the spine and look at it and then put it back, or it might be displayed on a shelf, but it's not really presented in a way that I felt the book should be presented, and that is like a piece of art. And so the section of the gallery, it's small, and so everything is on a shelf that's floated, and then the book is displayed like it would be a piece of art, with plenty of space in between. So we're not cluttered, we're very kind of bespoke as far as our presentation goes. And this is the front window. So if you come to my space, I have two windows, really kind of a unique storefront here on the Lower East Side, kind of old school, almost like a men's clothing or shoe shop, where you kind of walk in part way and you have windows on the left or right. So the window on the left, which I don't have pictured here, is for the gallery. So I have artwork in there. And then the picture on the right is specifically for the book, so that when you walk into the space, you know that you're getting what you're getting. You're getting a bookshop that specializes in photography books, and you're getting a gallery as well. So like I said, it's pretty much brand new. We've done a few book signings. We had one this past week. It's only our second one with the artist Sage Sawyer. She's an artist that I've been working with for several years. She has many publications out, but we were celebrating this new book called Peaceable Kingdom, which is a long-term project about looking at people and the animals that keep them company and vice versa. And most of these are taken at animal rescues or with families that have taken in animals that couldn't otherwise be cared for. So there's some exotic animals, a heck of a lot of monkeys here, but there are llamas and pigs and all sorts of things that in most cases the animal would have been euthanized or neglected or forgotten. And so these families or sanctuaries have taken them in. So it was a nice presentation of not only the book, we had prints. So if you go back here, you see on the left-hand side, I have print rails there. So an artist comes in and not only do we see their book and do a signing, we do a PowerPoint presentation, but they also have the opportunity to put prints from the book. So it kind of gives them a full, well-rounded presentation of what they do. Next week, we have a presentation by Sarah Stack, and Sarah Stack got her master's at the Duke University, where the archive of Hugh Mangum resides. And it was a photographer in the, I think it was the early part of the 20th century, who photographed a whole cross section of residents there. So a little like this farmer's work, where you have this kind of visual record of all the residents in that particular community. And so we're going to do a presentation of hers along with 2 other speakers, and then have some archival, actual real photographs from the archive, as well as some ephemera. Let's see, I got one more slide, and then I have a signing later this month by Amy Touchette, who photographed in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. So we have a book signing for that coming up. So I mean, that is really my presentation, not very in depth, but it's new for me. And it's been really exciting to bring a photography bookstore showcase, a place where photographers can come and present and celebrate the hard work that they put in on their projects, and then the publication of the book. And I know, I'm sure John could second this, that, actually, the project is one thing, making the images for that, but the actual process of producing the book and all the choices and decisions that need to be made, and then going to press and then binding it and then shipping it, it's quite a process. And so I wanted to celebrate that, find a way to celebrate that by creating a physical space where photographers could come in. And this isn't a vanity project. These aren't all my photographers. Sage Sawyer is one, but Sarah Stack and Amy Touchette are not. So it's not about, an extension of Foley Gallery for Foley artists. In fact, I think most of the photographers that are going to be shown here in the bookstore are people that need a space and books I like. And I'm like, let's do it. Because I've known so many people working on projects for so many years. They finally have a book and they're like, I don't know what to do with it now. And so this is a place for that. So I'm looking forward to, continuing the process. It's been fun. And anyway, that's it. That's my project. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Anybody have anything? While they're thinking, are you going to be stocking these books for a while after
Yeah.
they open?
Yeah, I mean, for a while. I really the goal is to move the books through. So
Right.
we have a signing, and that's going to be the big push.
Yeah.
Will we keep some books in stock? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then we have some more, marquee names. We have the new Stephen Shore, the new
Right.
Alex Soth, and
Yeah.
Jess Dugan. But that's not the emphasis, because you just go to Amazon or the publisher and pick that up.
Yeah,
We
you're
really
not,
want
you're
to
not going to
focus.
turn into a dashwood.
We don't need to. They're doing a good job at it.
Yeah.
And they do other things too that
Yeah.
that I'm not interested in doing. But
Right.
This is really an event-driven space.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea, because
Oh,
you're
thanks.
right, it's badly needed.
Yeah.
Michael, I have a question. All of these photographers, did you have a pre-existing relationship with them, that you knew who they were, or you were familiar with their work, or did the relationship start after the fact and you presented an opportunity to the community? Can you describe how all of that got started?
Yeah, sure thing. I've been working in galleries since 1989. So over my career, I've and John and I were talking before we let everybody in, that he and I met at a portfolio review way back when. So I know a lot of people, and a lot of people know me. So to start with, yes, the answer is I worked with people that I knew, that had books out, or that were friends. That's how it's starting. That's easy to do. But that being said, now I've been proactively reaching out to photographers whose books I've seen, or my colleagues know, that recommend them to me. So it's starting, in a more familiar core, the photographers I'm choosing, but that's certainly not a prerequisite at all. In fact, I would rather have people here that I'm less familiar with, and give them that opportunity than, have this be like all my buddies, doing this. I mean, that's a great way to start, because it's familiar, but in the long run, I'm open to any body of work, any photographer that has a book that they would like to promote, talk about, and have displayed here. So it will expand, because right now, my goal, it's ambitious, but I want to have a book signing once a week or at least 3 or 4 a month. So in order to keep up that pace, I need to, I need to reach out beyond what I know right now. So I'm sure in the next month or two, there'll be photographers in here that I had never heard about.
And I would guess that your active promotion for your openings or your gallery talks or through social media and I
Yeah,
guess
social
probably a
media,
lot.
but also
Launch
we have a very simple website called Launch Photo Books,
Okay.
and we have a newsletter sign up there. So you get on that, and then you will know about all the talks that we do. Now, I mean, at the moment they're in person. I don't really foresee me doing kind of live Zoom talks, but who knows?
Thank you.
Okay. Jim, you're awful quiet this week. Okay.
Is Jim usually a talker?
Jim's usually is a major participant.
Okay.
I guess we're not interesting this week.
Low, it's just low energy today. I've been
Okay.
up since 1 o'clock this morning, so.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap this up and you can take a nap. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming today. And let's see, coming up next week, 21st, I think it is, the Artist Talk Thursday night. Is Jeff Rich. Get a chance, stop by for that at 7 o'clock. And otherwise, hopefully we'll see you next month. Have a good weekend, all.
Thanks, and thanks, Michael and John.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Michael.
everybody.
John, good to see you again. All right.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Take care all.